Hell exists. The devil exists. The devil is a personal, living being, not a figment of someone's imagination. Please don't think of changing the channel. This is probably one of the most important TV programs you will ever watch. I'm Father Nicholas Gruner. Today on Living Your Faith, we'll be going over the struggles of St. John Mary Vianney with the devil and the eventual outcome. St. John Mary Vianney was born in 1786. Shortly after that, the French Revolution broke out. And as a result, St. John Mary Vianney had a very, shall we say, unusual childhood. He was a farmhand till he was about 20 years old. But even during that time, before that, he had to flee for his life to avoid going into Napoleon's army to fight the immoral wars that Napoleon was waging across Europe at the time. Finally, there was a general amnesty, and he was allowed to get back to his home, where he was then able to start studying for the priesthood. His father allowed him to start when he was 20 years old. His father kept him working on the farm. He always wanted to be a priest, and he showed this by showing his love for teaching the children, his companions, about Jesus and Mary. And at 20 years old, though, he was already older than most of the people in the seminary. And when he went to the seminary, the professors thought he was too slow, not smart enough to learn the courses. And so they sent him back to stay with the parish priest Eviculi, which is the parish where he went to when he went to church. He went to church there with his pastor, but he stayed in the rectory there. And now he was being taught by the pastor. The pastor was able to persuade the bishop and persuade the vicars of the bishop, the vicars general, to allow St. John Mary Vianney to be ordained because he knew how to pray. He knew how to pray very well. In fact, his power of prayer became extraordinary. And in fact, it's legendary even to this day. Anyway, he was ordained in 1815, despite the fact he had a difficulty learning Latin and other book learning. But he was not unintelligent. He was very bright. And as we can see from his sermons, there are books of his sermons that we can see from later on. Well, St. John Mary Vianney was attacked by the devil. He was attacked by the devil for almost 35 years. Many people know some of these stories of the attacks of the devil, and we can't tell them all today. But the first attack that I'm aware of started in 1818. That was just 3 years after he was ordained. And it was just after the death of his parish priest, the friend who got him to be ordained, that as soon as his parish priest friend died, where he was acting as his assistant for the first 3 years of his priesthood, St. John Mary Vianney was appointed to the village of Ars, A-R-S. It was a village that had not had a parish priest for many years. The church was closed and no one was going to church. Of course, this was after the French Revolution, and irreligion had been instilled by the French Revolution. People stopped practicing their faith. So when the curé was on his way to Ars in 1818, the devil tried to scare him by talking to him, and he finally realized it was the devil who stopped his cart, and he couldn't get it to move for anything. But when he made a blessing on the cart could go forward. Anyway, the attacks of the devil started really much more by 1824. At that time, the devil did various things. He had, first of all, it seems the strategy of the devil was to make him lose his sleep. At first, for example, the curtain on his bed, it sounded like the rodents were gnawing at the curtain. And that's what the curé of Ars, so he took a pitchfork with him to sort of push the curtain to scare off the rodents. But in the morning he noticed that there was no tearing of the curtain, that there was no, he thought by all the noise, even though he would push the curtain with his rod, with the pitchfork handle, that the noise would not stop. And thus he realized, and then in the morning he looked for the damage. He thought the curtain would be torn to shreds by all the rodents that were apparently eating at it, but there was not a shred out of place. It was perfectly fine. Then the devil started to make noises that would keep him awake. And so he asked a young man by the name of Andre, who was a strong young man, to come and stay in the rectory with him and see if there's something else going on. The young man brought with him a gun, a rifle. He was ready to shoot whatever intruder that was coming. At the first night, the young man tells us that he heard this noise. It sounded like there was people knocking on the door, and the whole house was shaking like there was an earthquake going on. He thought the whole house would fall down in an instant. And the curé of Ars asked him, he said, "Do you hear that?" He says, "Yes, I do." He says, "It's nothing. It's just the devil." As the curé of Ars referred to him, it's just the grappin. The grappin was his nickname. The curé of Ars called the devil the grappin. And so the next day he asked him to come back to stay with him the next day. And Andre said, "No, I'm not coming back. I've had enough of that for now, thank you." But so this kind of noise, sometimes it sounded like there's a train outside, like there was an army walking down in the square outside his house. It was one time it happened when it was during the winter and the snow was on the ground. But if you looked out on the ground out there, the snow was undisturbed. There's not one footprint in the snow. Obviously, the devil had many different ways of disturbing his sleep. But the curé of Ars got to learn that when these things happened, especially when they got worse, that the devil was letting him know, not that the devil wanted to let him know, but the devil was letting him know that he was going to catch a big fish, that there was going to be a big sinner coming tomorrow, the next day, to go to confession. Now the curé of Ars spent many years, many hours I should say, many years also in the confessional. Towards the end of his life, he was spending 16 to 18 hours in the confessional a day. That is, people lined up from all over it came from all over the place. 20,000 would come in a year towards the end of his life. And they would take their turn waiting for him to hear their confession. And so even he was confessing so many people towards the end of his life that the bishop would not even allow the curé of Ars to go on the priest's retreat every year because he says, the people over there need you more. So you can see that the curé of Ars certainly had a great, people understood that he was a man of God, that he was truly bringing them back to God. But it wasn't that way at the beginning. At the beginning, when he got to Ars, the people didn't want him to come. Some of them told lies against him to try and get him to be taken away. One even accused him of murder, although it was evident as soon as they investigated that he was not the one guilty at all, but the man who accused him. But the point is that in Ars at first, the people were quite happy to be not going to church on Sunday, but going to the tavern and wasting their time with food, rather with drinking and getting drunk and so forth, and with dancing. So it took the first years of his life at Ars struggled against the public sins going on in the town, and he had no or almost no allies in the town at all. And yet he fought against this because he understood that their souls were at stake. As the curé of Ars said about dancing, he said, the devil is around a dance floor like a wall is around a garden. It's not that every dance is evil, but it's an occasion of sin that people most of the time going to these things would fall into sin. And so he would fight against dancing. And finally, when he won the battle, the last day apparently was when the band came to do dancing on Sunday, and most of them were not engaged in it, but just a few. He was able to buy the band off by paying them what they would have earned that day, and they went away, never to come back again. And so let us remember the curé of Ars spoke strongly from the pulpit, spoke against the sins of the times, and he spoke explicitly and clearly so people understood what he was saying. He spoke very simply. This is one of the things that the devil spoke to the curé of Ars. Why don't you speak like the priests in the towns, in the big cities? They sound much more intelligent. You sound too simple. But the curé of Ars knew what he was doing. He was working by God's grace, and the people understood him. Now, he had gifts, because he did so much penance. One of the penances he did was to eat nothing but potatoes. He cooked his potatoes on Sunday. He cooked a pot of potatoes on Sunday, and that was it for the week. And he would then eat 1 or 2 potatoes a day, and then by the end of the week, he'd finish his potatoes and start another batch. So he did a lot of fasting. In fact, one of the parish priests from nearby came to the curé of Ars and said, "Why does God not hear my prayers? I've been praying for a long, long time for the conversion of the sinner in my parish." And the Kiravara said to him, have you tried joining fasting with your prayers? He said, no. He said, well, try that and see what happens. A few weeks later, the parish priest came back and said, God heard my prayers, the man is converted. But it's also a secret to how the Kiravaras won so many souls. The devil said to him one time towards the end of his life, if there were just 4 more priests like you in the world, my empire on the world would be overcome, would be ended. Just 4 more priests like himself. The Kiravaras, then when these noises and other attacks, in fact one attack when the devil was one time the bed of the room was on fire where the Kiravaras lived, and the people came to him as he was in church hearing confessions. He gave them his keys and said, oh, go and put out the fire yourself. And it was strange that the fire only attacked his bed and the things near his bed, but on his bureau where he had a relic of Saint Philomena, it was the flame didn't touch at all. But as the Kiravara said, well, since he couldn't get the bird, the devil went and took the cage instead. But these were, he was also dragged around the room by his heels. His bed was dragged out of place by the devil. There's many accounts of this. But when these things would happen, the Kiravaras understood there's going to be a big fish tomorrow. And that is, he would catch a big sinner to be converted. And so people came, as I say, by 1827, within 10 years of his becoming the parish priest and reforming the parish, people started coming from all over. And so there's one famous account of the devil, rather, this is not of the devil, but rather a woman came to him whose husband had just died. In fact, he just committed suicide. And the Kiravaras was, I guess, coming from one place to another. He was going to his confessional, and he saw the lineup of people there. And he called the woman whose husband had just killed himself. He called her by name and told her to come and speak to him. So she stepped in the line. He said, your husband is saved. Now the woman was very upset because she knew that the husband had killed himself. In fact, he had jumped off a bridge. And the Kiravaras knew the details, and he said, between the time that he jumped to the time that he landed and he died, God gave him the grace of making a perfect act of contrition. And in fact, Our Lady obtained that grace for him. He further explained that her husband, although he had not been a religious man, when she had a statue one time, about a month before he died, there was a statue of Our Lady, and in fact he brought some flowers towards it and gave it to his wife to adorn the statue with. And Our Lady, because of that little gesture of devotion towards her, she had won this grace for him to die with an act of perfect contrition, therefore to have his sins taken away before he died. So instead of going to hell, he was on his way to heaven. He no doubt had some time in purgatory. But the Kiravaras knew all these details and was able to console the widow by telling her that her husband had been saved. So there's many things about the Kiravaras, but let us talk about how the Kiravaras was able to transform his parish. As I say, he did penance. He only ate potatoes. The devil accused him of, you're a potato eater, as he would call him. And but his fasting and his prayers and his long hours in the confessional won him thousands and thousands of souls. When he was very sick, about 20 years before he died, he thought he was going to die, and the Kiravaras prayed to Saint Philomena to cure him. And he promised to say 100 masses in her honor if he would be cured. But 12 days later, he was cured, and he attributed his cure to Saint Philomena, and of course fulfilled his promise to her. Let us remember then that he was tempted not only by the devil's antics of keeping him awake at night, and it came sometimes that he was almost only got an hour or less of sleep in a day because he was being tormented by the devil by these noises and so forth. But Another attack on the devil of him was to make him think that he was a terrible sinner and that he had to go to a monastery to do penance. And 4 times he fled Ars, not because he didn't want the work or not because he didn't like the people, but because he thought it was his job, his vocation now to go to do penance in a monastery. And so then 4 times the people followed him and persuaded him to come back. Another occasion was he wasn't trying to leave Ars at the beginning, but they came up with a whole set of lies. They circulated a petition against the cure of Ars, and they were going to give it to the bishop. And when the cure of Ars heard about this petition, he asked to see a copy of it. When it was given to him, he took out his pen and signed his name to it himself and asked that he be removed from Ars. But the bishop would have nothing of it. And the bishop also, speaking of the cure of Ars, when the people would attack him, he said, I may not be doing, there may be many things that God will have to have a strict accounting for, but the one thing I won't do is to stop a man of God from doing his work. I won't be the one to stop his work. I will not have that on my conscience before God's judgment. The bishop understood that God had gifted his diocese with this great saint, even though the cure of Ars didn't understand that he was doing what God wanted to him by staying there. But he finally understood. He stopped trying to leave the parish of Ars. Just think of a parish that basically had no parish priest, that the people of France had been deprived of their priests because of the open persecution, that the people had not received the sacraments for years, they had not heard the word of God, and so forth. So if you take a parish like ours, which was outside the big city and hadn't had a priest for some time, there was an awful lot of work to be done to bring the people back to God. And yet the cure of Ars was undaunted, and he persevered against all the odds, against the tavern owners, against the people who put on the dances, against the secular people, the town council and so forth, all of them. And even people, one who lied about him, because he was a wizard, and he was practicing witchcraft because people can't live without a God. If we don't adore the true God, we will make our own false gods. And the devil knows, of course, he will also send his own false religions. In this case, it was superstitions and for curing a boy or something like that. But it was really, the man poisoned the boy because the cure of Ars was curing him. And then he blamed the death of the boy on the cure of Ars. The authorities at first believed him, but the cure of Ars was vindicated by his perseverance in prayer and asking Saint Philomena to help him as well. There's the account of a man who was a pious man, and he had just been to confession a day or so before the cure of Ars, when he went to a social gathering, a party, a dinner at a friend's house in the city where he came from, and he didn't know it, but these people were going to have a seance, that is some sort of table tapping. They call the devil down, although the people who go to these things don't think they're calling the devil. They just like the Ouija board, which is a diabolical thing, the board all by itself moves and you get answers yes or no and so forth. At the seance, he went to it, but he didn't participate, this pious man, because he knew it was wrong. But when he came back to see the cure of Ars a few days later, the cure said, hey, you have to go to confession. He said, why do I have to go? I just went to confession a few days ago. But you went to that, you were at that seance. Yeah, but I didn't know it was going to happen. Oh, I know that. But what you didn't do was you didn't resist. It's not enough not to participate. You have to resist. That reminds me of something that I was at years ago. I was also at a party, and the young people, they're about 10 years younger than I was. It was a number of years ago now. They were in their late teens, and there was this party whereby people would stand around. One person would be chosen to be sort of, I'll call him the victim for lack of a better word, and the other people would stand around, put their hands on the victim's head, and about 10 people with their hands on his head, and they walk around, and at a certain point the leader would say, stop. And then at that point, each one would take, the four nearest people would take one finger, one under his knee, one under the other knee, one under the pit of his armpit, the other armpit, and lift him like a feather. And it sounded to me like there's something wrong with this. And while they were walking around doing this, they're supposed to think of death. And then they're going to have this marvelous thing happen, picking this guy up like a feather. He was about 150 pounds. So I did a calculation in my head. It's about 35 pounds per person or so, 4 people picking up 35, maybe 40 pounds. And I said, I don't think I can do that by myself, put 40 pounds weight on my finger and pick something up like as light as a feather. So I said, the reason within myself, well, St. Alphonsus tells us that all things are caused by one of three things. Either by nature, if this is just by the power of nature, or by the devil, or by God. Now it can't be by God because God doesn't work miracles just for show like that. So it's either the devil or nature. I said, I don't know, maybe it's something I don't know about this. So I said to myself, this could be the devil. So I said, well, remembering that account of what the Cure of Ars said to that pious man who did not resist when the devil was being invoked in that seance, I did the opposite. I said, okay, I'm going to resist. But I didn't do anything. I didn't show any. I pretended to be watching television while they were playing this game about 10 feet away from me. And as I was pretending watching television, I was actually saying Hail Marys. That's the mother. If this is of the devil, stop it. Don't let it happen. So they tried it for 45 minutes. They made 3 different attempts at this game, and it never worked while I was there praying Hail Marys to resist it. I have to conclude that the devil was involved in it. In fact, when it was all over, and these people, I'd known them, even though they're 10 years or so my junior, these people they were talking with themselves, and I was listening, although I appeared not to be interested. I just wanted, and the leader said, she had done this a number of times, but the last time she tried it, that she put somebody out cold. He was unconscious for 2 hours, and she was frightened by it. Well, of course, by calling on the devil, I mean, the guy could have become possessed or something. So you think that with that, she would never do it again. But there it is. These games are out there. They exist. The Ouija board, the thing is that as St. Alphonsus tells us, there are only 3 ways that things happen. Either God puts the power in. If you lift your hand up, your hand goes up. If you have 10 pounds in your hand, you lift that 10 pounds of butter or whatever it is, you lift it up. That's by the power of nature. But if I'm picking something up 40 pounds as like the weight of a feather to me with my one single finger, then that's not the power of nature. No matter how strong a person is, someone's going to feel that weight, and it won't be just feeling like, after all, 40 pounds is not the weight of a feather. So it's either by the devil's power or by God. The devil has physical power. So by implicitly calling on the devil, by trying to do something beyond the power of nature, there's an implicit call, just like there's an implicit call to try and, with the Ouija board, asking the Ouija board, is it going to snow tomorrow? We ask the Ouija board says yes. How does that string answer those questions or spell out yes all by itself? It doesn't, of course. It's because the devil is doing that. So when you implicitly call on the devil comes to your aid. Well, the Cure of Ars said to this man, you should have resisted when you were at the seance. And that was the sin you made because you didn't resist. So this is the same thing here, that the Cure of Ars wants us to remember these stories, not just because they're interesting stories about his life, but also to apply them to our own lives. There are many more things that the Cure of Ars taught. One of the things, for example, was he had a chapel. He had a church, and he, like the other saints I've known, have built beautiful vestments, a beautiful altar, beautiful statues, very expensive. Although his cassock was tattered, was threadbare, but things of God he spent a lot of money on. Of course, it was not his money people gave him for this, but over the altar, on the side altar, he had an altar of St. John the Baptist, and the sign over the altar said, the price of his head was 1 dance. That was pointing out that the St. John the Baptist was beheaded, and because the king promised this immodest dancer that she would give him anything he would give this girl anything she wanted because he was so pleased with her exhibition of herself. And so, as a result, the price of St. John the Baptist's head was 1 dance. Just think about it. I think God allowed that in Scripture to happen for our instruction. Certainly the cure of ours thought so. Let us remember then that the devil is still active today. He does exist. It's a real fact of our lives, that it's a truth of our faith. It's a dogma of the faith that the devil does exist, that hell exists, that the devil is in hell, and it's and the devil can attack not only the cure of ours. He openly attacked the cure of ours because he didn't want him to have so much success. But he does attack us in many subtle ways too. Sometimes by getting us to be angry with our friends, sometimes by getting us to be irritated when we shouldn't be, sometimes by many different, making us jealous or telling us to wear clothes which are not modest, all sorts of things. The devil makes these suggestions. He also can cause vexations too, but that's time for another account. I would like to tell you then, dear friends, that hell really does exist, and the devil does too. His greatest deception ever is to make you think he doesn't exist. The true accounts of St. John Mary Vianney are documented by many credible witnesses. St. John Vianney was attacked in many and various ways by the devil, and these attacks lasted for many years. But St. John Vianney always won. He won by his prayers, by his penance, by God's grace, and by his perseverance against the devil. Thus, St. John Mary Vianney was able to bring the people of Ars back to God, and was able to accomplish this through the graces that our Lord gave him. And he also brought many thousands of souls who came to him from all over Europe to talk to him. Thank you for spending time with me here today. Remember to pray the Rosary every day and to ask for the graces that God wants to give you through Our Lady's Rosary and through her intercession, so that she will protect you and your families from the daily attacks of the devil in your lives. Please join me next time on Living Your Faith. God bless you.
In the final vision on October 13, 1917, Our Lady silently held out the scapular, a gesture which indicates that she wants everyone to wear it.